All right, Greg, welcome to the show. How's things?
Things are good. How about yourself, Vinny? Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Not too bad at all. Now, Greg, you are a UAP researcher, but I want to get into that. Initially, I'd like to talk about this ongoing situation with these drones. You're from New Jersey. You've been covering the story. You've been on Fox News. You've written some articles. So let's start off when this first came on your radar. What sort of happened there?
Sure. So when it first came on my radar, I saw it on social media about the drone over Trump's course. And I didn't really pay much attention to it. You see things like that all the time. And then when friends started texting me pictures and asking me questions, and it started to blow up right around Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving, that's when I kind of started getting more invested in it and doing a little more digging and trying to get to the bottom of it.
Were any of these pictures and things that you were sent by your friends, did any of them sort of stand out as looking like something not quite right, like not normal drones, maybe?
Actually, more of the recent ones have. Like when my buddy just sent me one a few days ago, and it was like 16 lights right over his house right before the sun went down. And it was just very odd. What are those 16 lights doing there? They were kind of in a formation too. And he's into the topic as well. So he was very confused. And it wasn't some type of misidentification of birds or anything like that. He said they were just hovering there. So it was very odd.
It is. It's really strange. I mean, it's just reached fever pitch now. I mean, we're talking about potentially drones here, but this came into the purview of a lot of UFO researchers, and they've kind of taken it on board. And it does seem like there is something completely anomalous to it. Now, whether that's just because of lack of information or there is genuinely something, how do you kind of view that side of things?
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole thing is confusing and it's interesting. So a lot of what you're hearing isn't really anomalous behavior. There's some things like the going dark when they're viewed or somebody gets close to them. That's anomalous. But just like large drones aren't peculiar. But then you look at the bigger picture and you say, well, it didn't just happen here. It happened in Langley, it happened in Colorado, it happened by you over in the UK. And again, those weren't even that anomalous other than being able to evade detection. So, that's where I kind of come in. I'm saying, all right, well, there's a pattern here. So that means there's something going on.
What's the response been like from, the local sort of leadership in the area of New Jersey, sort of the mayors and things like that?
Yeah, the mayors and the local authorities are the ones raising the alarm the most. They're trying to get answers from the state authorities and from the federal government, and they're being stonewalled. They're being told absolutely nothing. People are walking out of meetings upset that they're not getting information, and they're just being told not to worry about it, basically. So yeah, everybody here is pretty confused and pretty irritated that we don't have more answers from the federal government.
And obviously, people are seeing these flying over like residential areas. What kind of military assets are there in that area of kind of New Jersey? Is there any bases and things like that?
Yeah, we have several bases. Picatinny is up in North Jersey. Fort Dix recently changed names. I forget what that name is, but yeah, we have a lot. We have Earl Naval Base as well. So there's a lot of assets in this area. And being next to New York and Philadelphia and by Washington D.C., there's easy access to other federal resources.
So are they all experiencing the drones over the military bases as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where it gets, more like the other sightings that we've seen in the past is that you have these constant drone incursions over the bases, around the bases. So there's no, you could say over suburban areas, towns that, oh, well, maybe it's just hobbyist drones or something else. But when the military is seeing them over their bases, that tells you that it isn't military and that there's definitely something anomalous about it. So they're seeing them hovering over there for hours, and they just can't identify where they're going and where they're coming from. Supposedly, they just go dark.
Yeah, and we've had like I think certain individuals saying that there's nothing to be worried about. It's not a matter of national security, but surely this absolutely constitutes exactly that. That they don't know where they're coming from. I assume that they've tried to take them down with anti-drone technology at the military bases, yet they don't know what they are, where they come from, or anything. So it just seems there's a lot of contradictions.
100% contradictions from all over the place. And yeah, how can it not be a national security threat when our airspace is being, impeded with impunity? It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, heaven forbid one of these drones is carrying some type of, explosive and goes to we have two nuclear bases here. I mean, if they're just flying over there, what's to stop them from doing anything, So it's definitely a national security threat. I think that the Department of Defense is hiding by saying it's not a national security threat so that they're not responsible for it. I mean, you look at Arrow should be investigating this. These are anomalous flying objects, which is their responsibility, as Senator Gillibrand keeps saying. But according to Chris Sharp, they haven't investigated any in Langley, they haven't investigated any in New Jersey, and they haven't investigated any in the UK. That's indefensible. This is what they're here for. So it makes no sense.
Yeah, it seems like Arrow seem to make the excuse that they're more looking into sort of historical UFO sightings, and they just kind of pass the buck and don't really seem that interested. But what's the response been like from the White House?
Well, I mean, Biden's not in good shape himself. So, he did an interview about it the other day, and he's having trouble just staying with it. So he said there's nothing nefarious going on. But then you listen to the spokespeople from the White House, and they're sending mixed signals. One day they're saying that it's all hobbyist or it's mass hysteria. And then the next day they're saying they're taking it very serious. So, they're not really the messaging all across the board from the White House to the federal, FBI to the Department of Homeland Security. It's a terrible messaging. We're not getting answers, and they're telling us different things. So,
has there been any kind of issues with any of the air corridors or air traffic of the FAA got involved to your knowledge?
Yeah, so they actually just finally imposed a ban on parts of New Jersey. I think 22 areas, actually right next to me, my home in Bridgewater, they imposed a ban. I don't know why it took a month to do it. And again, even there's mixed messaging, because they say that there's no security threat, but then they're banning the drones, saying because there is a security threat. So it doesn't make much sense how they're doing that. In general, everybody keeps seeming to want to pass the hot potato to another organization, another agency, and say, oh, it's not our responsibility. I mean, you have senators walking out of these classified briefings saying nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows whose responsibility is, who has authorization to do anything. So, it's a lot of confusion.
You've written some articles as well on this. Could you tell us about that and who you wrote for and what you kind of covered and what points you really wanted to get across?
Sure. So I wrote for the Philadelphia Inquirer, the 2 articles, op-eds, and in them, the first one, I wanted to just say why the situation here is out of control, why it's terrible that we're not getting answers. I also wanted to connect, and I led into this one in the second one more, the UAP issue with the UAS issue, unmanned aircraft systems, because we're getting, again, mixed signals or suggestions there. We have Senator Gillibrand having a hearing about UAP incursions and drone incursions and saying Arrow's not involved. So I think that that's another way that the Pentagon is hiding behind the responsibility here by calling these drones or UAS instead of referring to them as UAP, what they should be. So I just wanted to put that out there so people were aware of the differences and why this is an important issue for the Pentagon to take up. They have an $850 billion budget. If anybody has the technology to detect these, it's them. But even they're saying, I don't know if you can trust the Pentagon, but even they're saying that as soon as they try and lock onto them, they go dark and they aren't detectable by radar or anything else. So, it's mind blowing that they wouldn't be able to see where they're going or where they're coming from. Actually, a state police helicopter flew over one of these drones recently. That was a 6-foot drone. As soon as they flew over it, lights went dark and they had no detection. They couldn't see it. It wasn't on radar or anything. So that leads you to believe that it is more of an anomalous object rather than just a typical drone.
Yeah, I mean, that's what doesn't make sense, is that these things are seen loitering for hours on end. If they're able to avert detection, it almost seems like somebody's either got to be seeing everything that the drone's seeing all the time, or alternatively, it is something genuinely anomalous. I mean, you mentioned there that you made that connection to UAP. Have you had any kind of pushback on that at all?
No, I mean, I haven't had much pushback at all, to be honest. I've gotten a lot of support from that. And I feel like that conversation is coming about a little bit more. Chuck Schumer has talked about the UAP aspect of it. Rep. Garcia has talked to that. It might be UAP. And it could be both. It could be a drone and a UAP. They're not mutually exclusive. So I feel like people are sort of starting to come about to it. I'll tell you one thing that I've noticed nobody has mentioned, actually, and this is very interesting to me, is last November, you had that hearing with the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And in it, you had John Kozlowski, who's the director of Arrow, and he was talking about a anomalous object that Arrow is investigating. And it struck me as interesting. It struck me that it could be connected to what we're talking about now, because you also see Orbs in New Jersey right now, and you've seen them over Langley, and you saw them in Colorado and other places. And what he said was that a police officer went to investigate an orb that was floating a few hundred feet off the ground. When he got there, underneath the orb was an object that was blacker than black, and it was the size of a Prius. And then as soon as the officer got close, the object tilted 45 degrees up and then flew off faster than any drone. He said up to 100 times faster than any drone, flashing blue and red lights. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, there's all these drones that we are seeing around these bases and everything that you can't get eyes on other than the lights. And that makes me think, well, that could be the blacker than black object, because they're also flashing blue and red lights, and then they go dark. So if a helicopter's over this blacker than black object, turns off the lights, it might be invisible. That might be how it's invading radar also. So I feel like, I don't know if it was intentional that they're putting out these breadcrumbs to kind of, let people know what we're dealing with. But I definitely think there's a connection between what Kozlowski was talking about in that hearing and the drone incursions that are going on all over.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, that there's just such a mixture of information. And, we see so many videos across social media from people taking stuff. I don't know if that's helping it or making it worse, because clearly some people are genuinely misidentifying everyday objects, aircraft and things like that. But, when you mentioned there that strange sighting the police officer had, and we had similar here in the UK when the RAF Lakenheath incident was happening, there was a lot of talk about these F-15s flying up to try and intercept these objects, and they were just running circles around them or just disappearing and outpacing them.
Yeah, I was just reading that also, that they just disappeared once again from all, observable methods. So somebody's been doing that, and they've been doing it for years, because the same things were happening back in the 50s. Almost identical incursions were happening over military nuclear sites. So this is not a new phenomena, and it definitely makes you think that there's a connection between all of these. It's the same actors that are behind this, that are behind the UK and the Colorado, South California ones, and all the other ones that have come out.
Yeah, I mean, also it makes me go back to the swarms that were happening over the Navy ships. I think that was 2019 off the coast of California. The Omaha video being one of the well-known ones that Jeremy Corbell released. Yeah, I think people forget that there's these connections with these old cases of similar things. I think that's always something we have to keep in mind. And one thing, we mentioned the Biden administration before, and I forgot to mention that it seems that they've deployed inadequate anti-drone technology, that they're only capable of tracking these class 1 and 2 drones, not class 3 and 4. Do you know anything about that, or what these classes represent?
I don't know anything about the classes so much, but I'll tell you, I don't think there's drone technology to capture what we're dealing with. Otherwise we would have gotten more images. Otherwise there would have been more information. I don't think they have the technology right now to capture them. So I don't think it matters what they deploy. I mean, we had Governor Murphy on TV a couple of days ago talking about how he doesn't think there's a problem because we have all this sophisticated equipment now that we got from the federal government. But that equipment doesn't work for them. Why do you think it's working for you? Just because you can't see them through the equipment doesn't mean they're not there. We know for a fact that occurs all the time, that the objects are there, people can see them visually, and then they try and look through the equipment, and there's no sense of them. So, I don't think the federal government's prepared. And that's kind of mind blowing. Like, how can they not? How can you not know what's over here when it's happened so frequently and so, for so long? I know that they just had another skiff, and the Virginia senator was in there, and he came out and said they still don't know what was over Langley. That was 17 days of an incursion. They had a NASA reconnaissance shuttle come in to try and figure it out. They had the most sophisticated equipment. These things weren't like, the government's here, let me go. They stayed. They were staying there. They were hovering. They were flashing lights. How could we not figure out after 17 days what those were? It just it boggles the mind.
It does. And then you say, that's just over a year ago. You'd think that they would have made preparations or put something into place for it happening again, which obviously it has. Yet here we are with no difference, nothing whatsoever.
Well, I'll tell you, I think part of the reason is because of the construct that we've built inside of the Pentagon around UAP and how they have, refused to share information on it. So I feel like, that has led us to now when we have these drone incursions, they're still trying to hold on to the information. And that's what I'm hoping Senator Gillibrand's trying to get through is that, we need Arrow to be investigating this and we need them to be sharing information. And they're obviously being kept out of the loop. Somebody is, they said they received no reports. How did they not receive reports? Reports had to have gone somewhere. And they said, no, they're drones. Don't worry about it. So, it doesn't make any sense. And there's definitely some, intentional misdirection and, withholding of information happening.
Yeah, and it's funny. Donald Trump mentioned the other day that he insisted that the government knows where they're coming from, where they're going, and everything. I mean, if we don't see an end to this soon, and then Donald Trump becomes president, I mean, what could potentially happen there? He might completely do something about it, which could be good.
It could be good. I hope so. I hope the messaging that he's saying now continues when he's in the White House. And there's possibility. I mean, he's got a lot of good people around him that are very in tune to the UAP issue. John Ratcliffe, who's the former director of national intelligence, he had said before that they've captured these UAP with satellite imagery, exhibiting technology that's beyond anything we have and we can't defend against. So he's going to be the next director of the CIA. And then you have Marco Rubio, who's been, a very vocal proponent of transparency around this issue and the concern that these objects bring. So he has a good team around him that can help with the UAP disclosure and transparency. And I hope it continues. I hope once he gets in there, he is able to shed some light on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of rumor and talk that Trump could potentially be the disclosure president. I mean, I don't normally try and I don't get my hopes up. I try and temper expectations. But with a team like that around him and the way things are going, it does seem a little bit more likely than normal.
I'll tell you, it just feels like that's the momentum. It just, I'm not saying it's an intentional thing or there's this plan, but if you look at all the points that are happening, it seems like it's moving towards something and, moving towards a point where it's going to be undeniable. And having Trump in there, with his desire to be transparent, he's talked about it. It does seem like that's the direction that this movement's going currently. And hopefully once he's in there, some of the people whisper in his ear and can get him to say something. Just give us some information. We don't need to know everything. We don't want to know all of it. We don't need to know every technology the Department of Defense has to capture these objects. I mean, you don't even have to tell us about crash retrievals yet. Just tell us that there are these objects and they're probably not from human origin. And then we'll deal with it. But the longer this goes on, the worse it is for the end result.
Yeah, I mean, this drone thing needs to come to an end as quickly as possible. They need to tell us something just because they do. It's their job. So hopefully, because otherwise people are just going to speculate and continue this loop of what we're going through of just craziness, really.
I'll tell you, it's been a rough week in New Jersey. We've had an Iranian mothership. We've had a nuclear warhead being missing. We've had Chinese spies here. And now we have our water smells like nail polish. So it's been terrible for us,
And the funny thing is, I've seen online, people are trying to connect all of those things as well. And that's what makes it more difficult because it muddies the water and you get more people perpetuating these conspiracy theories. And that's just not helping whatsoever. So yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. And it's just like with the other thing that you were saying with the videos and the images you see, so many people are misidentifying it. Yeah. I don't even think this is like a concerted effort to disinform. I just think it's a natural thing that happens. You have all this other information that muddies the water, and then the truth is very hard to see because so many people are the guy that said the Iranian mothership, the senator from New Jersey, he said, "Oh, I have high sources." Well, tell us who your high sources are. You know what I mean? If you are coming out with that, then tell us who this high source is. Because we don't know where that person got the information from. And now, again, to your point, conspiracy theories are running wild. People are getting scared. And, people are shooting at the drones. I'm not sure if that's true even. I saw videos of people shooting at the drones. I don't know if it's true or not. But But that's what happens when you have all this misinformation, and why we need more transparency from the government, why they have the responsibility to tell us what they do know and what they don't know, because then at least we can determine for ourselves, more truth of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, just sticking with the Iranian mothership there, that could really spark some international issues, because I think after that was first mentioned, somebody released a photo of an Iranian port with the ship in, and then another photo with the ship not in port, saying, it's left port, so it could fit the story. But then, I don't know, about a week later, we hear that it's in the ocean not far from Iran doing something else completely. But that could really spark some international tensions that we obviously don't need at the moment. So it's really it's critical we get it right.
And that is that's also what you're wondering. Do they not, is it a foreign adversary and they don't want to say it because they don't want to start a war, because that's an act of war? So again, that theory goes out there, and then people are concerned about it. So yeah, it's who knows what the actual source of these items are, these objects, but not telling us what we know creates these conspiracy theories and makes everything much worse.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, these objects clearly want to be seen. Then they're not trying to hide unless they're being, someone's chasing after them and they're getting very close. But it's very brazen that they're flashing lights. There's a lot of them. I tell you what, I did get sent about a week or two ago. I almost lost track of the timeline. It's been going on for so long. Somebody started sending me these beach cam live webcams from the beaches in New Jersey, and I spent a good few hours watching one of them, and it was pretty interesting. It almost felt like I was seeing objects coming in from the ocean across the beach, and I had a flight radar open at the same time, tracking flights into, I think it was Newark Airport was near the nearest airport, so I could kind of tick off quite a lot of them. Have you heard about those or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know a lot of people down in Ocean County. I have a house down there, and they say that they've been seeing these orbs coming over from the beach. Again, it is hard with the misidentification because there are planes that come over there. But to your point, people do use the flight radar, and they do cross-reference that. And that goes back to the Coast Guard story, where Coast Guard said that they had over a dozen drones following one of their boats. And they had no idea what it was. And then you had John Kirby, the White House spokesperson, and you had Jim Himes from the House Intelligence Committee. And they said, oh, no, those were flights. But then the Coast Guard came out and said, no, these were 100 feet behind us. These weren't planes. They were 100 feet in the air behind us. So there's definitely something. And that's why a lot of people are thinking that they're coming from the ocean. One police chief said that there was 50 coming from the ocean, and you hear it all the time, that there's UAP that go into the ocean. I mean, you have the Tic Tac and situations around there that were above the water and around the water. So yeah, I did see those. I actually saw one, like you said, a dash cam or a ring doorbell, and a glowing object was hovering there, and I was like, oh, it's just like a star or something. It's hovering there for like several minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden it just started to move. And I was like, wait a second, that's not normal behavior, So yeah, you do see odd ones. I don't know if you saw the one that a former U.S. Air Force person, Matthew Nelson on X posted of a glowing orb. I think Ross Coulthart also reposted it. But it's a very interesting video of a high altitude, orange orb that's moving slowly. He's zooming in on it, and it's just glowing. And he gives a whole story behind it too, how it was there for like 45 minutes stationary. I'm not sure at the time, it might have been an hour, might have been 45 minutes. It was stationary, and then it started to move slowly, and then it started changing direction, So there are interesting videos out there, and it's tough to source, but you got to do your due diligence and figure out which ones are legitimate. And I think that one's legitimate, and some of the ones that we saw from the coming off the ocean are.
Yeah, I agree. I did see that video as well. And that's what's funny. We have these ones that don't have the kind of green and red kind of drone style lights. Yet we do have the large ones with the drone lights that obviously aren't still conventional. So it seems like we've got this array of different objects. No one's talking. I mean, early on, the FBI, and I think it was the Department of Homeland Security, put out a joint statement, again, playing it all down, which doesn't really wash anymore at all. Yet we're not hearing from them anymore either. They just kind of disappeared.
They're just hoping it all blows over. The government's just waiting for this to go away, And I mean, to their point, this does go away when you look at the other areas. Eventually the drones stop coming, the objects stop coming. It seems to happen in different locations around the world. Although I have heard from, different reporting that this is happening all around the world right now. It's not just New Jersey. It's happening in other countries. It's happening in other states. So I think they're trying to lay low in hopes that it'll blow over, but it's just going to pop up again. And this is going to be a recurring issue. So, they got to start providing some answers and getting out there. And that's why the Pentagon has to be the one. They had the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, like you said, go and do that hearing in the House. And they sat up there and said, we have no idea what it is, which was embarrassing. But what we need is the Department of Defense to be up there. We need them to be in the hearing, and they're the ones that have to give us the answers. They have the satellites. They have the most advanced radar. So, but they're the worst with playing hot potato and saying it's not our responsibility right now.
How do you think the media is dealing with this? Because you appeared on Fox News. What's your general view of how they're covering it?
I don't think they're covering it terribly. I think they're a little uninformed, not Fox News specifically, but just in general, the media about this issue. You had said before, nobody's connecting the dots between these different, scenarios, these different swarm incursions. I want to know what Langley base was like. That is relevant to here. Like we need to press the officials on those type of points. I think the officials are actually getting let off easily because everybody's kind of in the moment, just focusing on New Jersey, just focusing on drones. There hasn't even been many questions to my knowledge. I think there were a few recently, but are these drones UAP? Like that's got to be asked to the Pentagon, to the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, to Congress, to everybody. And if they're not, what's the difference? Why aren't these UAP then? Like, are these the ones that have the 50 to 100 years technology ahead of us? But honestly, the news media doesn't really follow the UAP story, so they don't see the big picture. And that's why I'm trying to write articles and, do whatever I can and to put this out there and say, no, there are bigger issues here. Obviously this is a national security issue in New Jersey, but it's a part of a broader topic that needs to be discussed. But people are having a hard time wrapping their mind around it or even going there.
Yeah, well said. I think it does need to be kind of connected to the UAP subject now, because that way, if worded correctly, we can weed out what information they do have to suggest that it's not UAP. Well, you must know something to be able to say that. It seems we're having to use these tricks and tactics to get the very small breadcrumbs and answers that we're so desperately looking for. But I really appreciate people such as yourself kind of covering this, and I look forward to seeing how it develops. But I'd like to move on now, because I wanted you to tell me about a recent trip you took, about slightly earlier in the year, a trip you took to Capitol Hill and what the purpose was and how that went.
Yeah. So I went to Washington, D.C. I had done a fundraiser to get the Congress, to get them informed about the UAP Disclosure Act that was being debated at the time between the House and the Senate. Really, in the Senate, they were trying to get it part of the manager's package. And so I went there. Nick Gold from Declassify UAP, he helped me out. We went door to door, knocked on congresspeople's offices, walked in, presented them with the book, presented them with the letter, presented them with a copy of the UAP Disclosure Act, and gave our elevator pitch as to why this is important. Most of them didn't know about it. They were staff. They didn't even know about UAP Disclosure Act. So I was happy to inform them about it, to hope that they would talk about it. And usually there was like 3 or 4 different staff in there. So I would go through the whole spiel and tell them why it's so important. I mean, you have the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. You have people from the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senate Intelligence Committee. These are the most well-informed members in Senate proposing a 64-page legislation about technologies of unknown origin, about non-human intelligence. You would think that more people were interested in this, but they just didn't. It wasn't on their radar. So we went around. We tried to inform them. Sent letters to all the other ones, all 535 Congress people, and unfortunately, it didn't pass. But I do think it was good to inform them, and it puts it on the radar. In situations like this in New Jersey, I think it'll help in the future, to make different legislation, get support for it. And again, connecting the UAP issue to topics like this will also help to, enlighten a lot of people. And just to reverse for 1 second, I'll tell you people like Matt Laszlo and Marek Van, I don't know how to pronounce his last
Von
name.
Rennenkampf, yeah.
Yeah, they do a great job of bringing this issue up to Congress, So I mentioned Matt Laszlo to a lot of the people that I went to because, he's always on Capitol Hill. So yeah, it was a really good experience, and I'm glad I did it. And it was a lot of work, but I felt pretty accomplished after we left.
Yeah, I think it's grassroots activism. It's actually getting off your butt and doing something, which is incredible to see. But you mentioned in there you handed over these copies of the UAP Disclosure Act, and you mentioned the book. But if you can expand on that, because it wasn't just any book that you handed to them. So tell us about how you got. Well, tell us about it.
Sure. So actually, so Lou's book, Imminent. Parts of it actually got released early. It leaked online, So I'm not gonna lie, I looked online and I read it. So I'm sitting at home and I'm reading, what Lou goes over in the book, and I'm just like, how can people not read this and get motivated, or want to know more? So I was like, I got to do something. Like, I got to get this book to Congress so that they can read it, So that's why I did the GoFundMe campaign. And I just, I'm the type of person that I get something in my mind and I got to keep going. I got to keep going. So it got in my mind, like, I got to get this book to everybody in Congress. I didn't get it to everybody in Congress, but I got to about 150, almost 150 different members in part of, in all the important committees, the armed services, intelligence in both the House and the Senate. So, I also wrote letters to each of them, and I personalized them. Like somebody like Gillibrand or Rubio. I actually ran into Rubio while I was down there. I was coming off the elevator, and I look up and there he is, and he's getting on the elevator to go to his office. And I had just left his office. So I was like, "Oh, Mr. Rubio, I just left something on your desk. Please take a look at it about the UAP Disclosure Act. I appreciate your, support there." So, those type of individuals, I just wanted to thank them for continuing to push, to continue to get transparency. And then the people that weren't informed, I did it to inform them. And then the people that were, against it, like the Mike Turners, the Jim Himes of the world, I put things in there to express why they were not correct and how it wasn't very beneficial to their constituents to keep the information withheld. So I tried to, make it appropriate for each person that we went to. But yeah, it was a good reception. I'll tell you, they weren't expecting it. They weren't expecting a guy to come in there. I got dressed up in a suit. I tried to act as professional as possible, and I come in there talking about UFOs. But I think that's what we need. We need that type of movement. We need people to get motivated to do something. And I'll tell you, I get like I'm on an email chain now with the Senate Armed Services Committee. I haven't gotten many responses. I got one email. But I've also emailed and they've said, "Oh yeah, we got the book and we looked at it. We sent it to the correct people." So it definitely had some impact.
That's really encouraging. Really, really good. I mean, it's great that we have individuals like yourself. You mentioned Nick at Declassify UAP. We got UAP Caucus and other groups. So hopefully, we may get more movement on the UAPDA, maybe 3.0 next year, going into the NDAA for 2026. Will it be by then? So.
What would be nice? I actually met Lester and Ronak from the UAP Caucus down there. We had a great chat. I love talking to people like you and like them, people that are just interested in the topic, and are very knowledgeable about it. And you can go back and forth, theories and whatnot. But what I would really like to see, if the UAP Disclosure Act doesn't get reintroduced, we need a church committee. You know what I mean? We need Senate. We need somebody. We need a group. We need a subcommittee to have subpoena power, to bring subcontractors in, hold them under oath, testify in front of Congress, where if they lie, they're going to jail. Like, that's what we need. So I think the next thing that I'm going to be pushing for is the subcommittee or the church style committee. I think that's what we need to get to the bottom of it. And look at what happened with the last one, the revelations in there. People that say, "Oh, there's no conspiracies, the government wouldn't do anything wrong." No, they do. And we found out because we looked into it. So there's definitely something happening here. You hear a lot about a disinformation campaign against the American public. That's almost definite at this point. I mean? That's pretty much proven to be factual. Why are they doing it? That's what we need to figure out. And, when you have a subcommittee like that, you can get to the bottom of it. So hopefully the UAP Disclosure Act is passed in some form next year, or we get a church style committee, or Trump just comes out and says, "Hey guys, here's the situation."
Yeah, although what about I keep hearing this talk of Trump hiring a UAP Zar, in his new, when he, becomes president again. I think that could be beneficial potentially.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that we don't have right now, and I mean, I kind of feel like Arrow was supposed to be it, but we don't have like somebody to speak to us or speak to the public about these issues when they come up. And that's part of the miscommunication. That's like a huge issue with the New Jersey, is nobody knows whose responsibility it is. If we had like a UAP czar or somebody that, kind of was the messaging person to the American public, that would be very, very helpful. And we could, then direct questions to the appropriate person that is responsible for answering them and willing to answer them.
Yeah, I feel like that would go a lot better than these press briefings with Kirby and people like that, because that's just gaslighting.
You hear the journalists that'll ask the questions, like the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin.
Lloyd Austin, yeah.
Lloyd Austin. He was out in Laos, and this was right after the hearing with Arrow. And the first question he was asked was about the UAP hearing, but the reporter had to preface it like something along the lines of like, "I hope you're okay with this question." She didn't feel comfortable asking that question. She thought there'd be some blowback. And then just a few days ago, with the Pentagon press conference about the drones, one of the reporters say, "I shudder to ask this question." They're like afraid to ask this question about these. This is an important issue. It goes back to Edward Rupert back in the 40s or 50s, where he said that by the end of the 47 flying saucer wave, they shut it down so that reporters knew, if you ask questions about this, that's like asking us questions about our nuclear facilities and where they're at, and you're going to get, shut out. So I feel like that's kind of the same thing that's still happening. Reporters are discouraged from asking these questions. And that's why it's good to have other ones that, like Matt Laszlo and others that do it, but we need more of them to get on board with it and stop being afraid or, hesitant to ask.
Completely agree. And that's like, again, I'll reiterate, like people like yourself writing these op-eds, and you mentioned Marek earlier doing great work, and Matt, obviously. But listen, Greg, it's been an amazing conversation. I look forward to seeing what else you do when you cover this subject. I really do. And I'll make sure that in the description of this video, there are some links to your articles and that people can go and check it out. But yeah, once again, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Glad we can make it happen.
All right, man. And to everyone watching, please, go and check out those links, read the articles. And as always, hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. But for now, enjoy your Christmas, take care, and goodbye.